Hello and welcome to the beautiful Rossendale Valley. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Geography of the Rossendale Valley. In this episode we're going to look at the modern day valley and the types of industry we have here and how do people live now in the valley. What kind of jobs do they have? What kind of entertainment is there here? And what's bringing money into the area? Behind me we have Haslingden and Helmshore going off into the distance and grain. You can see that the valley has changed dramatically to what we were looking at in the previous episode when we were looking at development in the Industrial Revolution. We have large warehouses here, we have modern day chimneys sticking up from industrial estates, we have supermarkets which are a modern day invention. These were never around in the Industrial Revolution times. So the main types of industry that we're finding in our towns down in the valley, we've got the financial services industry, working in banks and insurance. We've got hospitality, working in restaurants and cafes. We've got tourism, such as the East Lancs Railway and Ski Rossendale. We also have agriculture and farming that's still taking place in the valley. And we have quarrying, an ancient industry that is still being done today. Let's now have a look at some of them industries in a bit more detail. So the first type of industry that we do in modern day is agriculture. This industry has been going in the valley for thousands of years, and it's not changed that much. We still do pastoral farming here, the farming of pasture, which is keeping livestock on the moorland, on the sides of the valleys, rearing them, and then selling them for their produce and selling them for a profit. What's changed, though, is that this farming now is more economic farming. It's not subsistence farming. The farmers don't just do it to provide food to feed their families, they want to make money from doing it. So these animals, such as sheep, cattle, they're reared and sold, but also produce products, such as dairy products, such as wool, to be used in textile industry. So what they do when they've farmed them, they sell them at market. But one thing that we're doing now in modern days is there is more and more farmers markets popping up all over the valley. You can see a farmers market, there's one in Helmshore and there's also one in Rossendale. The local farmers from the valley will go to these markets and sell their produce there. So they'll have butchers who sell their pork meat there and beef from their cattle. This is good for the environment because they're not transporting their produce a very long way to get to the market to sell them. So they're not burning a lot of fossil fuels to get them to market. So this is one way that we are becoming more sustainable in the valley these days. So that's our first industry that we've looked at, farming and agriculture. Let's look at our second industry, which is quarrying, which has also been happening in the valley for hundreds of years. Here at the top of Whittle Hill, we also have a millstone grit quarry. With this quarry, you can see that it's a working quarry, still working today. We've got dumper trucks moving the sandstone around, and we've got large excavating equipment which will be removing the sandstone from the cliff faces. So not only was this a big trade during the Industrial Revolution, it still provides employment today. So a lot of new houses that are still being built in the valley today, they're being built out of this millstone grit. So you should go around and see some new build houses. The ones that look the yellow colour, it is likely that the stone for them houses came from this exact quarry. So we are using materials that are mined and quarried within Rossendale to still build the houses we live in today in the valley. The retail sector has had big investment in Rossendale recently. The market has had a big redevelopment, providing lots of jobs for people in the area. There has also been investment in bars and restaurants, such as the Northern Whisper establishment there. Bank Street has also been a focal point of redevelopment, bringing in extra money through cafes,
bars and restaurants opening. This all attracts people to the area, and they spend their money, it goes into the local economy and improves the town. And we also have the only temperance bar in the UK left, which is also a good tourist attraction too. The regeneration of Rossendale, building a new bus station, helps bring people into the area to spend their money. If they're coming into the town centre, they're going to spend the money there, help the local economy. But not only this, the regeneration of old mill buildings. This provides people with jobs in the area as well. All these mills being regenerated makes profit for the construction industry. This new housing brings people into the area. There's also regeneration of other mills further up the valley into offices, into warehouses. Now let's have a look at what tourism is doing in the valley and what impact does that have on the local economy.
The tourist attraction that you can see behind me is the East Lancs Railroad. The East Lancs Railroad stopped operating as a commercial railroad in the 1980s. It was reopened in the 1990s as a tourist attraction. The company that runs the East Lancs Railroad brings in lots of old steam trains from all over the UK and runs them on the track. This brings in money into the area because train spotters from all over the UK will come to look at these fantastic steam engines. The company also puts on specific events, such as the World War weekend, where people dress up in World War attire and the railway platforms are themed as if it was 1945. This also brings in a lot of people into the area to look at what this area might have looked like during war times. A final one, which is great for families, is the Santa Special that runs at Christmas time. People from all over the northwest come into the Rossendale Valley, spend their money because there is a Santa Special event on. So more and more people are coming for this event and it sells out each year. But what's the point in having these big tourist attractions if people cannot get to the valley? Let's have a look at how transport has influenced the modern day development of the Rossendale Valley. The reason why the tourism industry can be so successful in the valley is because it's quite easy to get to and has good transport links. Behind me is the A56. This is a major road that leads to the M66, which leads into Manchester city centre. So we have a very good link into a massive city centre within the northwest. In Manchester, over 1 million people live, so they have easy access within half an hour to get to all the attractions within the valley. Because of this easy link, the hospitality industry over the last couple of years within the valley has boomed. We've had in Rossendale and Ramsbottom new cafes, new restaurants, new hotels open up. Also because of these good links to Manchester and cheaper housing, more people have moved to this area. They can live in the valley and have an easy route to get into Manchester where they could work and get high salaried jobs. So it's really an attractive place to live and visit at the moment in the valley, especially the west side of the valley where we've had high levels of development. This development is uneven though. If we head further east through the valley and head through Waterfoot, Stackstead, Bacup, the development isn't as advanced. We don't have as much new shops, new bars, new restaurants opening there because we don't have the good links to big cities like Manchester. However, government incentives that have been brought in this year mean that investment has been put into towns such as Bacup. So this investment will hopefully help the hospitality industry there and attract people to that part of the valley so that part of the valley could develop more. So there isn't just uneven development within the valley itself. There is uneven development within the northwest of England as well. We have Manchester down the road, which has over 1 million people living there, which has big companies that invest there, that provide jobs for the people within Manchester, and therefore allow Manchester to develop quicker. But why are people invested in Manchester rather than the valley? Let's go and have a look now at the physical factors which are hindering the development of the valley. Here we are at the top of Whittle Hill. We're at this location because we're going to talk about the development of the valley and how it's going to develop into the future. Now here, we're looking south out of the river, out of the Rossendale Valley. We're looking south because we have a large city in the distance. That city is Manchester. Now, Manchester developed at a very similar time to the valley itself during the Industrial Revolution. Manchester was known as Cottonopolis because there were so many cotton mills there, and that fueled the city and generated income. Now, after the Industrial Revolution, Manchester did have a dip in its development. However, now it's continuing to develop at a much faster rate than the Rossendale Valley. Now, why is this? Why do we have a huge settlement that houses over 1 million people just to the south of the valley, and the valley itself is only home to around about 60,000 people? Now, the reason behind that is there are some physical factors which lead to this. If we look out towards the south, we can see that all the land is flat. Now, us as human beings, we are quite lazy. We don't really like a challenge that much, and it's much easier to build a huge settlement on flat land than it is to build it in a river valley with steep sides, which is much harder to engineer large skyscrapers, large buildings, and therefore house lots of people. So that's one of the factors, that we have flat land here, and in the valley we have steep-sided land. So it's much harder to develop steep-sided land because it's harder to build buildings on it. The other reason is down to the Irwell itself. Here in the valley, we are in the upper course of the river. Therefore, it is the steep, fast-flowing, and it's not very deep here. Therefore, it's hard to ship goods up of a river that's like that. Down in Manchester, the river is much wider, it's much deeper, and therefore you can transport goods up it. And you can transport goods all the way from the Irish Sea. So they use this to transport lots of goods up the River Irwell and the Mersey up to Manchester, and then they use these goods to develop Manchester much quicker. If you wanted to ship them goods from Manchester up to the valley, you needed to do it via rail, or back in Industrial Revolution times, before rail was invented, you would have had to do that by horse and cart, which is much more difficult, and therefore impacting the rate of its development. Now, because we are close to that hub of Manchester, where there is millions and millions and millions of pounds each year made for the local economy, there is good jobs there. We've got an access through the motorway, which leads from Manchester up the valley, and people who live in Rossendale can get into Manchester very easily. So, in terms of an investment opportunity for people, the Rossendale Valley is very good, and that's why we are starting to develop. Because people are investing money here, because we are close to the hub of Manchester, you can get into it very easily, and therefore it is a good place to live and a good place to invest, because lots of people live here and lots of people have access to it. So that's why we're looking down on Manchester, and that is why Manchester is so important to the future development of the valley. If we keep our trade routes and improve our trade routes with Manchester, we are going to start to develop at a much faster rate. By doing that, we will have better housing, better jobs, better quality of life within the valley.
So we've looked at two factors there that are limiting our development in the valley. Now let's look at two factors that are actually helping our development. The valley is a unique place in the fact that we have high altitude land, we have the high valley sides, and we have high levels of rainfall. Now we're using these to our advantage to help our development in the valley. The first one we're going to look at is the altitude. If you look behind me, over my shoulder, you can see a wind farm. Now we have high altitude land all over the valley that has high wind speeds up there. So what we have done in the valley, we've sold this land to energy companies to build wind farms to generate energy. So the money raised from selling that land can be invested in the valley and help develop it. And also, we're now generating clean energy for the valley, which is making us more sustainable. We're protecting the valley for our future generations too, by generating this electricity and using it in the valley. So that's one way we're using our location to our advantage to help us develop. Another way is the reservoir behind me. In the valley, we have very high levels of rainfall. What we're doing with this rainfall, we're trapping it in reservoirs. So we're building reservoirs and trapping it, and we can use this water for clean drinking water. But we get too much rainfall and we can store too much for the people that live in the valley. So what we can do with this excess, we can sell it and transport it to other parts of the UK. The money raised from selling this water can be invested in the valley and help develop it further. Also, if more reservoirs want to be built in the valley, we can put incentives on them. The companies that want to build them will have to invest in the valley itself if they want to construct a reservoir here. Those incentives will lead to the development of the valley further. So not only are we using these two things to our advantage, the high rainfall and the high wind speeds, we're also being more sustainable in that. We're generating clean energy. We're providing clean drinking water. So that's it in terms of using our location to our advantage into developing ourselves. Let's have a look now at what the future has to hold for the valley. So what does the future of the valley have to hold? We are becoming more sustainable. We're relying more on renewable energy sources such as our wind power. We are drinking our water from our reservoirs in the area. We're not having to pump it from other areas. We're sustainable in that way. In terms of the industries that we have in the valley, the hospitality industry is booming right now. We have new bars and restaurants popping up everywhere. These bars and restaurants are attracting people from our cities such as Manchester to come and live here. We have a great nightlife. It's cheaper to buy houses here, but you can still work in Manchester because we have them great transport links. In terms of the new industries that we have in the valley, we have leading medical industries like orthoplastics. These are leaders in medical research. You can live in the valley, work for a really strong company like that, research life-changing things for people. That's just one of the industries that we have in the valley that's new and that's booming right now. So that's it, we've come to the end of our geographical tour of the valley. We've gone all the way from the Neolithic times, 10,000 years ago, all the way through the Industrial Revolution to modern times, and we've even had a look at what the future of the valley might look like. Thank you very much for watching this series. I hope you've enjoyed it and you've learned a little bit more about this jewel in the northwest of the UK. Hopefully I'll do some more series when this quarantine's lifted, look a bit further afield in the valley. But at this point, it's goodbye from me, and I hope to see you again.